What I really wanted to do today was give you an intro to my teaching style. I've been posting pictures, but I haven't done anything live. And so much of drawing is the movement. You know, you can't just look at pictures or sped up processes. That's really cool too, but it's very important that you see it happening and being made in real time. Um, Drawing's a dance. You'll hear me talk like that. I just love music. But you know, the way you move, whether you're drawing with your arm or your fingers, you know, details like that are really, really important. So today I'd like you to notice words, and you'll be listening and watching at the same time. That's why I don't do a speed up step by step, because I want you to hear and just get the feel of the how quickly or slowly these things happen. And you can play them again and again and again as often as you want to be reminded of the different details. Sometimes the first time you hear something, because you haven't tried it yet, it doesn't sink in the way it does after you've tried it. Trying is how you develop your questions. You know, once you try and you're having trouble, then you really have questions. And then when you hear what I'm saying, you'll get much more from what I'm saying based on your own experience. Experience is everything. I feel that it's a total myth. I strongly believe this, and I base this on my experience teaching as well. It's a myth that some people are born with the gift to draw, and some people, you know, born artists, and other people are not. If you're here and if you're listening to this video, you are definitely drawn to this because you have the eye, because you see, you respond, and you're excited. So if you feel that you have no drawing ability, you've got to let that feeling go and be open to the possibility that drawing is a skill, that drawing is a language, that drawing is a technique. You've got to just take those first steps. And believe me, you know, I have my walls too. I'm studying how to run my business now, and that's a wall for me. So I appreciate that you're getting over a wall by studying drawing. And if you stick with me, I know you can do all this. I know you can. So don't give up on yourself. I'm counting on you. I want to see the fruits of what you're going to get from my courses. So today, going back to just a face, okay? And you're going to notice I have all kinds of flexible fluidity in the way I move my hand because I've been doing this for years. But that doesn't mean that you're not going to get anything from this. Listening, I'm going to give you clues, and you're going to start, and you might feel like you start with chicken scratches. But that's okay, because what you need to do is develop this relationship between what's on the paper, what's here, and what your hand does. And this three-way relationship over time, what you see, what you want, what's on paper. You know, at first they're going to really be at odds. And over time, they're going to come closer together until what you want meets what your hand can do. So let's go. We're going to do some faces. I'm just going to start with a frontal face today, kind of help you map out how to build a face. You've got to just take those first steps. And believe me, you know, I have my walls too. I'm studying how to run my business now, and that's a wall for me. So I appreciate that you're getting over a wall by studying drawing. And if you stick with me, I know you can do all this. I know you can. So don't give up on yourself. I'm counting on you. I want to see the fruits of what you're going to get from my courses. So today, going back to just a face, okay? And you're going to notice I have all kinds of flexible fluidity in the way I move my hand because I've been doing this for years. But that doesn't mean that you're not going to get anything from this. Listening, I'm going to give you clues, and you're going to start, and you might feel like you start with chicken scratches. But that's okay, because what you need to do is develop this relationship between what's on the paper, what's here, and what your hand does. And this three-way relationship over time, what you see, what you want, what's on paper. You know, at first they're going to really be at odds. And over time, they're going to come closer together until what you want meets what your hand can do. So let's go. We're going to do some faces. I'm just going to start with a frontal face today, kind of help you map out how to build a face. Welcome. I'm glad you're here. Okay, so we're going to talk about fashion faces. We're going to start with a frontal face, the basic frontal face. And I'm going to start from the ground up. So if you're new to drawing, it's okay. Because I want the face to be not just how to draw a face, but how to draw. I really want to open up something new to you here. And I don't want to assume that you already know anything in particular. So I'm going to talk about all kinds of things, not just the face. I'm going to use the face as an opening to have you think about all kinds of things about drawing. And the great thing about faces is you can always work with a mirror and draw your own. So you can draw your own face a million times in different light, different moments, different angles, different settings. And I want this to be a good foundation for you to start drawing, and drawing. I'm assuming you're new to drawing. You may not be, but what I've noticed with all my experience and all my years, I never get tired of drawing. I love drawing, and every time I come to it, even when I'm teaching the most beginner class, I get totally absorbed. So I hope that if you have experience already, you'll have a similar experience. I'm using the Prismacolor Ebony pencil. I hoard these pencils. You know, I never quite really have enough of them. You can get these at Staples. You can get them at any art supply store. You can get them at Michael's. Prismacolor Ebony. It's just a graphite pencil with a nice thick and sensitive lead. So it's graphite, but you notice when I'm using the side of it right now, it goes from very light to very dark, and yet it's a little bit reflective. It shines because it is graphite. Another thing is, as far as line goes, you can go very thin to very thick and dark. So it's very expressive, and I think that with fashion drawing and fashion illustration, expressive capacity is everything. Okay, I'm going to loosely follow this picture as something to go by, but what I really want to be giving you as well is a roadmap for creating a face from your imagination, even when you don't have a reference. So you don't always have to be drawing from faces you see, but when you're new at drawing, the best thing you can do always is be drawing what you see, drawing what you see, drawing what you see. Practice by drawing what you see, and you'll find that you get better and better, and you build a vocabulary of techniques, shapes, forms from drawing what you see. And hot or cold pressed papers, toothed or smooth. Don't use smooth. Smooth paper is going to be very smudgy. It's not going to get these nice textures that you get when you rub with the side of your pencil. Toothy paper will hold your pencil and give texture. And you know, with fashion, texture is such a big thing. You know, getting a fabric-like texture and fuzzy things, woolens, tweeds, things like that. Okay, so some things I want to talk to you first off is going to be about drawing techniques, period. One thing that I think happens to most of us when we're young is we start learning how to write. A, B, C. And that's pretty much the end of our great drawings. I think at some point we start to replace drawing with writing, and for the rest of our lives we seem to be confused about the two. There's no confusion to have. You use your hands to write. When we write with our fingers. When we draw, we're really going to focus on drawing with our arm. Sometimes with our wrist to create arcs. Okay, but we're going to start right off by practicing drawing with our arm. So something you can do to warm up is practice drawing circles, spheres. Okay, circles, light. See how I'm drawing very lightly? Okay, because another big thing in our classes, we are not going to be using erasers, or very minimally. To get out of the habit of using erasers so that we can learn by default, we're going to train ourselves to draw lightly until we're certain of what we're doing. So you can do circles and you can do ellipses. Okay, and you'll find that there's a lot of energy in this motion, and that you draw them with your arm. Okay, I'm actually standing right now. My paper is here. Now if I get really in close, And right on top, I start drawing with my fingers. That's good for fine detailing, but the first thing you want to do is step away from your paper so that you can constantly be looking and then assessing what's wrong. If you're too close, you won't even see your mistakes if you have mistakes, okay? First thing I'm going to do is draw an egg shape. You know, a little bit narrower at the top, a little bit wider at the top, a little bit narrower at the bottom. And that's going to represent my head shape. Now, I'm saying fashion face because, yes, it's the fashion face. We call them faces, but one of the biggest problems people have is focusing on the face and forgetting that the face exists on a head. Okay, and the hair and everything else is a part of this face. You can get all of the details of the face perfectly, but if they're not situated properly within the head, she will actually look terrible. It's amazing how correcting the head can make the face you drew beautiful. You think you can't draw, and then you make a few corrections with the head, and you say, oh, that face was pretty, but it didn't look pretty when the head was wrong. So I'm going to be talking about two things, the face and the head. Let's not forget we're always working on a head. Okay, so we have this shape I've drawn very, very lightly. Ebony pencil, it gets very dark, it's very smudgy. All of that is on purpose. There's nothing here I'm doing ever that isn't on purpose. So stick with me. I know your hands are going to get dirty. You're going to get nervous about the mess. I strongly believe in making a mess before getting refined. You're not just going to pick up your pencil one day and draw a perfect fashion illustration. You're going to build your drawing. Let yourself be loose. Let yourself make a mess. Let yourself get confident. And then I'll show you all kinds of techniques for creating clean drawings. And you'll probably be quite surprised by many of them. Okay, so here's our ellipse. First thing I'm going to do is create a little grid on here with light lines. Okay, it's like I'm making a map, a proportional map right now. I want to define the top of the head and the bottom of the chin for our purposes now. You won't always have to do this. Okay, top of head, bottom of chin. This represents the top and bottom of the head, not of the face. Okay, the top of the head is really, if you think about it, whenever you look at a face, the top of the head is actually behind the face along the head. And I think this awareness is very important. Okay, and I'll tell you why as we proceed. Next thing we want to do is we're going to start placing features on the face. Since this is a frontal face, I'm going to make another line that represents the center front line of the face. It's just a pure vertical. So actually it's pure horizontals, pure verticals. Okay, and then the next step is I'm going to start laying in the eyes. And I want you to notice that eyes are halfway down the head. So I'm going to put a guideline here. So this measurement is equal to this measurement. Equal. Halfway down to place the eyes. Now it's amazing because we're so emotionally tied into eyes that we always think they're higher up. Always. We also think they're huge. And these are just natural things that we do based on perception. I think there's so much emotion happening within eyes that we always tend to think they're bigger than they are. Not only that, but the eye area is large, but the actual opening of the actual eye is quite small. And okay, so now we're going to get more defined with the eyes. What happens along this halfway line is we want to place the eyes, and there's a few guidelines to bear in mind. One is that there's a full eyes width between the eyes. I'm going to draw that in right now. It certainly isn't something I want to be in my final illustration, but it will help you plot out your first few faces. The illusion that we see when we look at eyes is we think there's much less space between the eyes, and then we tend to draw them too close together, and that can look very strange. So make sure you give a full eyes width between the eyes, and then we're going to draw the eyes. Basically, they're almond shapes. Okay, and whatever photo you're looking at, you can use as a reference. But as a beginner, you know, I always used to draw almonds. And I'm very passionate about this this whole face speech because I suffered with faces for so long. And we're so emotionally tied to faces that it's a wonderful feeling when we finally start getting them right and liking what we're doing. Because we have such an emotional tie-in to them. And as long as you don't like your faces, you tend to not like your drawings that much. Once you start to like your face, you tend to like your whole drawing. It's very interesting. Okay, so here's a simple almond shape. When you draw this almond, there's a few things to think about. If you're looking at a photo, you have a direct reference. But if you're not looking at a photo, or you're not looking at the mirror, you won't see it. You know, you need to be looking at something to see it. But what I tend to notice is that I tend to see the top edge, the top eyelid as almost an S shape, and the lower eyelid as sort of an S shape. But all kinds of variations within that. So I could kind of play with that kind of bending of those lines. But another thing to think of, line quality. You'll hear me talk about that so much over the course of your education with me. Line quality is the light and dark in your lines and the variation between the two. If you don't have a dynamic variation between light and dark, your whole drawing will start to take on sort of a cartoony effect. But variety between light and dark will give is more like the way we really see things. For example, in this photo, definitely this upper eyelid looks black. That could be makeup as well, but lower eyelid is very, very light. So likewise, I can use a heavier line above, and I could leave the lower eyelid extremely light, as a matter of fact. But here I've actually made it sort of heavy already. Another really important thing about eyes is, you know, we tend to think here's the eye, here's the iris, you know, this round ball floating. Well, it's a little more complex than that. If you float the iris inside the eye, your model will look shocked and scared and hyper and wired. Okay, so what you actually have to do is conceal the iris by overlapping. Okay, you never show the whole iris, and this will relax her. Now you can experiment. The more you cover the iris, at some point that she will start to look sleepy and drowsy, and then at that point you are going to want to cover less of it. Okay, so you have to experiment with what's too much and what's not enough. And then always add tone to those eyes, because if you leave them white, she will look very much the possessed zombie. All right? And then the biggest thing about eyes that I didn't even mention, okay, we talked about this sort of almond shape. What I want you to pay a lot of attention to is how tall is the eye compared to how wide it is. And you can even make very specific measurements. For example, this is 1 by 2. This eye is almost 3 times as wide as it is tall. So I can even use my fingernails to measure such a thing. Yes, it's about 3 times wider than it is tall. That is so important to get that right proportion. So people tend to draw the eyes very tall compared to their width, and it's just an extremely common error, and I'm telling you from experience. So that's another like red flag. Just bear that in mind, that the eye isn't very tall, but it is quite wide. Okay, now we have the crease above the eye, which you can draw by relating that line, gauging its distance from the upper eyelid on each side. And again, there's many variations depending on the model. And then eyelashes, I tend not to draw every lash unless we're making a big deal about the lashes for some reason. But if you see, if they're really visible, you could draw some of that in. I tend to never draw it. What I would do is use a heavy upper eyelid line instead. And that just looks like a lot of lashes. But a lot of illustrators have a lot of fun with lashes, so I'm not going to deprive anyone of that. Oh, I never do it, and now I'm doing it. Okay, we'll see how that goes. And then finally, we have the eyebrow to deal with. And what I do is I pretend I have an imaginary ruler, and I find the correlation between the inner corner of the eyebrow and the eye, and then the outer corner of the eyebrow and the eye. So I draw in these sort of imaginary ruler guidelines to help me plot out the beginning and end of my brows. And very carefully pay attention to how close that brow is to the crease and what its shape is. Okay, and now I wouldn't make the habit of drawing every hair. Try to just break it down into a shape, either like a liquid liner, single brush shape, or, you know, a kind of a fuzzy line here like I did with the textured paper, but not drawing every hair. It tends to get pretty distracting. And then you can adjust things. I'm not going to talk about shading yet. There's a lot of shadow on her eyes. Some of it's makeup, some of it's actually caused by 3D form. I'll talk more about that later, but now it's like we have these eyes floating out of space. What I do usually recommend is that we sort of map out everything before we get very detailed. This way, if anything's out of place, you can adjust it right away, rather than putting all your time into a perfect pair of eyes and not knowing if they're sitting in the right place on the face, let's say. So next step, we're going to move in and talk about the mouth and nose. Okay, so when I'm building the nose, I'm going to take you back into the world of spheres. You know, I can't think of a better exercise than sketching spheres as a warm-up. Why? Spheres are how I create three-dimensional round forms, which is basically what I consider the body to be made of. You know, the bust, the shoulders, the nose, chin, the rear end, and then anything that's not a sphere tends to be an ellipse, like the bicep, the calf, the heel. Okay, you're going to get a lot of mileage out of your ellipses. You can practice drawing them light. You can practice getting darker. And there's no need to draw the perfect, crisp circle for any need. Just practice sketching them lightly, sketch them light, sketch them darker. And notice that there's sort of a leap of faith that happens when you do that. Drawing with your whole arm. And notice how I'm holding my pencil. Okay, I get a lot more control when I hold my pencil this way. But it's none of that is quick movement. And this kind of movement is more, it's easier on your body. Draw with your arm. You can draw a quick, smooth, perfect line with your arm that you could never draw so smoothly and quickly with your wobbly little fingers. So you'll be able to draw faster, more fluidly, and more energetically than you ever imagined when you start drawing with your arm. Okay? You've got to give yourself the room to explore that. Okay, so here's, again, top of head, eye level, which really represents to me like the corners of my eyes, and then bottom of chin. Okay, halfway down is what represents the bottom of the nose to me. And I like to draw that in kind of dark because the bottom of the nose is always dark anyway because it falls in shadow. If you kind of imagine all light coming from above, you know, then it makes sense that there are shadows under the brow bone, shadows under the eyelid, shadows under the lip, under the chin, under the nose. These are all places where light from above doesn't hit. Okay, so it is going to be a dark area anyway, so drawing in a little shadow there never hurts. And then halfway between the bottom of the nose and the chin, I draw another line, and that for me represents the space between the lips. And depending on the model or the angle of her head, you know, I might move that line very slightly up or down based on what I really see. You can actually be so precise about it by just measuring with your fingers. Oh, bottom of nose to middle of mouth equals Middle of mouth to chin. Oh, what do you know? I thought it was halfway down, but it's actually closer to the nose. You know, fine. Adjust accordingly. So I'm going to move this up a little bit to be more accurate. You know, I can actually take real measurements. Fantastic. So this is going to be the new center of my mouth. Let's see how that goes. Okay, so for nose, as far as the width of it goes, you could compare it to the width of your eyes, if that helps you. This nose really feels like it's just as wide as the eyes. Or I might compare it to the width of the mouth, or just feel it out. But I always feel it as 3D. I want it to be 3D. So I feel out the tip of the nose, and then there's these two subordinate spheres on the side. And depending on the model, the ethnicity, the personal, you know, there's a million variations. And that's what makes each model unique. So I just feel it out. This drawing the spheres really gives me a three-dimensional, I feel like I can touch it coming towards me. But when I feel like I've mapped it out properly, all I draw is what's black, which is usually nostrils. It's just trying to accurately get the shape I'm seeing. And like I said, when you've done it enough times, then you can really quite effortlessly create your own shapes, and you won't need even to look at a photo. But it's always fun to have a guide that you're looking at as inspiration. I don't like to get really busy with 3D effects of the nose. You might just want to smear a little bit to represent the shadow that you see on that 3D form, which, for example, I'm seeing a lot of it down one side here. But don't overdo it, and make sure you let the whitest place stay white. And that's one time I might use my erasing, only as to make a white highlight show up, not to erase lines. I really want you to build up your drawing out of a big mess. It's very important for your development to build your drawing up. Okay. The reason I'm drawing this little shadow here is because it's so pronounced in the photo. And actually there's a lot of shadow here. I use the side of my pencil to capture that. And I see a lot of shadow in the side of this eye. Again, I'm using the side of my pencil to show it. And if you're having a hard time seeing shadows, 99% of the time just squinting helps me see them. Another thing is, though, that I'll often avoid using pictures that don't have shadows. And often it's those beauty photographs where the full-blown light on the face and you can see all the makeup, but there's actually no shadow being cast. Really try to find photos with shadows on them for all of your work while you're learning to draw, because light and dark is such a big part of your development. Seeing light and dark, and it will help you give 3D form to everything you draw, and it will also break things into shapes of light and dark. Okay. She's getting more and more real. It's funny because the face is emerging and the head is still so vague, right? Okay, so now we're going to get into the lips. Okay, now we're moving into lips, and I have to say this is a fun one. It's such a pretty mouth here. Remember that I had said it's halfway between bottom of nose and bottom of chin. But in this case, I realized that it was really a little higher, so I adjusted. So between the lips is this line here. Keep it very light and thin. I mean, this line isn't even straight, right? She's got that smile kind of shape. I might just draw that as a guide, but usually I don't even start in with that. The very first thing I do when I'm getting to the mouth is I separate above the center of the mouth and below. So below, I'm going to build a sphere, okay, as wide and short, or as tall and narrow as needed, depending on the model, Okay, so we've got the shape down here. And she's slightly smiling, so in the case of smiling, or in the case of sometimes the mouth really feels like it has a dent in the center. Sometimes I'll use 2 ellipses for the bottom. So it can be 1 or 2. But for the upper lip, I almost exclusively always use 2 spheres. Okay, and you pay attention how tall you want them to be, how wide. Okay, once I've drawn in all these spheres, I feel a lot less scared to come in and get really specific. Just before I come in with an actual line, see, before I ever do lines, I'm always doing forms. If I get really specific, I just want to pay attention how wide is that mouth compared to the nose, let's say. I might adjust my spheres accordingly. And then I always say, when you look at a face, look around the room, look around your friends, whatever you're looking at, the darkest part of that face is that line. It's like a black line. So once you've built the mouth, you can come in with confidence, create that line. Sometimes that line has some differentiation, like a variation in the center. Sometimes it's smooth, because again, a very unique thing to each model. But I do try to keep the corners turned up ever so slightly, because I so often see such angry fashion models, such angry fashion images. If you turn those corners down, there really is a subconscious kind of angry vibe that comes across. Sometimes people draw these beautiful collections with these really angry looking models. And I'm hoping your girl's going to be feeling really great in your clothes, right? So, dark line for center. And then to really finish it off, I just put a dark shadow under the lower lip. And I'm not making that up. You know, there is this dark shadow here. Again, squinting will always help you see it. And another trick I have, like, people tend to think lips, just like that. Never draw the lips like that, because it looks like lip liner. So drawing the outside edges of the lips, okay, we see these edges in real life, but they're not black, right? They're very subtle differences in tone, skin tone to pink, let's say. Sometimes even the edge of the lip is actually very light compared to, it's anything but a black line. You know, unless you put lip liner on and then your lipstick came off and the lip liner is still there. And that's usually not a look that people are going for. So, to create the shape of the mouth, you really draw everything but the mouth. With the nose, you draw everything but the nose. Okay, so shadow underneath, deep shadow line through the center. And one of my favorite tricks is to shade the entire upper lip. So you see me drawing a line now, but the whole thing, the line disappears because I'm going to add tone. Okay, so the line becomes only the edge of tone. And that's one great way to create a mouth. Another way would be to, I'm noticing in the example here that there's actually more shadow on the outer edges of the mouth here. Now granted, for design illustration, fashion design, etc., you're rarely going to need this much detail in your faces unless you're really doing a fashion illustration of a face or to promote beauty products. When you're creating your figures with faces on them, you're never even going to go this far. But the more face studies you do, the more you'll build your vocabulary of shapes, shadows, techniques, and then you can use those to create the faces for your models. Okay, now we're done with what we would call the face, aren't we? That's the face, but we have a whole head to deal with. So let's talk about how we're going to do that. Okay, one of the biggest mistakes people make is adding hair onto the head, especially at the sides, which is totally appropriate for voluminous hair. But so often, when the hair is close to the head, I notice students adding a lot more. So this is a big test in drawing what we see, not what we think. Drawing what we see, not what we feel. Or not symbolizing things. And this is a whole journey that we're all going to go on together. So don't worry. I do feel in my photo here that there is volume added to the height of the hair here. Like her head might be there, and the hair is actually hyperextended. So That's okay, but a lot of times it's not, and I will discuss that in other face demonstrations that we will also do. So what's my point? Okay, so we have to define the hairline, which is not a solid line, right? It's a very broken line, so it can be really stressful and confusing for us. So let's just plot it out. It's usually like a quarter or a third down the head. And you can, when you sketch it out lightly, you can pay attention to how it relates to landmarks on the face, such as how close does it come to the eyebrows. Okay, this section here is very important. On the other side too, how close does it come to the eyebrows? What if you could break it down into one diagonal line? You know, what would that line look like? Okay, this is just helping me define some extremities of the hairline. That's it. Okay. Next, I'm going to focus in a little bit on these ears. Pay attention to, usually I can draw a diagonal line from the eyebrow and from the mouth. So imagine an endless diagonal, okay? And that will help me find the top and bottom of my ear shape. And I do that on both sides. Okay, but the big question when you're drawing in those ears is how close are they or how far are they from the eyes? So some people will say half an eye will bring you to your temples. Use that as a guideline. Then look at your drawing, see if you need to adjust it. But half an eye will help keep you close enough, because people tend to go way too far. People rarely go too close, but they tend to go too far. So just try to keep it as close as it really is when you're looking at a sample. Okay. And then we're going to have to start committing now to a jawline and things like that. So here I go. Starting next to the eye, I'm just going to carefully carve my way into this contour line, always paying attention to how close is the jaw to the lip, how close is it to the chin, being as realistic as possible, how close is it to the side of the eye. Okay, and we're going to talk a lot more about contours and creating lines, gosh, from a million different angles throughout the course. So you can only get better at this as we progress. She does have sort of a split chin. I could kind of draw that in if I wanted help creating that shape. And what I like to do is sketch in the lines as I'm sort of map making the face, but then when I do come in to actually draw the line, if I like what I sketched, I'm going to come in with a really one single clean line. After all that careful planning, not a sketchy one. All right, and then I can come back now to those ears. We don't need every detail for the ear. Okay, fashion illustration isn't usually about ears, it's usually about something else, so we just minimize that a little bit. And now with back to the hair, we have the hairline and the hair. Hair is a real mixed bag. What you need to know about hair, for one thing, fashion garments are all made out of yarns and threads, right? But do we draw the threads? No. We draw the jacket. We don't draw all the threads that make the jacket. Hair, same thing. We're not going to draw all the hairs. We're going to draw the shape of the hair, the silhouette. Just like with garments, silhouette is so much. You know, is it a bell bottom? Is it fitted? Is it tight? Is it full? Is it both? You know, where is the waistline? Hair is a shape. Let's get down to basics and think of it as a pure shape. So we have our hairline edge shape. Now I'm going to pay attention to some things. For example, up this side of the head, this shape is not very wide, right? Not very wide at all. We'll keep it super narrow. Then at this section of the hairline, the hair is becoming very tall, right? Then let's see, at this temple, hair is wider than it was on the other side because there's like volume. And then at chin, how wide is the hair? Quite wide. Okay, and these are just some notes. I'm taking notes basically. Mapping and note taking. Okay. Good, and now I'm even mapping out her clothes. But then the big deal is I've mapped out her hair. Now what I'm going to do is use contours. Now we haven't gone in depth into contour. You're going to be new at this. What I'd like you to do is, if you've already kind of blotted out these shapes, you're going to try to take one clean line to really show the texture of the hair. This hair is quite smooth, so it has only a few edges to it. Now wait, this one line is really strong, so I'm going to draw it in my pencil. Okay, and then now I used to have a terrible time doing these kind of shapes, so I'm sure you're feeling anxious. I will discuss this more in depth with you going forward. For now, maybe just watch and learn. Okay, I see a very, very black area right here that's going to create depth around the face and also sort of project the face forward. I actually see something like that here too. And I'm just going to draw it while I'm thinking of it. So light and dark is still really important. And then you always have the freedom to double check and then change things that don't feel right. That's huge. Okay, if you have any illusions that people draw perfect drawings immediately all the time, you're just fooling yourself. Professional artist just knows, processes for getting that perfect drawing and what to do when it's not perfect and knowing when to throw it out. Okay, don't just assume that they have some mystical talent. It's all about technique, and that's what I want to give you so you can have all the joy of creating this beauty for yourself in your own image. Okay, now I feel that I want to actually bring this out a little bit here. So see, correcting myself, and I'm allowed to do that. Now you're seeing a whole lot of lines. You're probably starting to see what's going on. I'm taking notes. I'm thinking. I'm taking notes. But finally, I would like to see this hair as one whole shape. In this particular case, there's a lot of dark tone through the hair, all through here. So I'm going to take my pencil, and without getting specific about the direction of the hair, the individual hairs, the individual little waves, I'm just going to create a solid shape of hair because it helps me see what's going on. Okay, and then I had this one big curl, this big wave, right? And then I had this area that was lighter, so I can maybe draw in a lighter tone with my pencil. And then I had some individual shapes here. And then this is actually the collar of her jacket. There's a lot of information. It can get really confusing. You can do a few lines that show the direction of the hair, but really I want to just separate the hair from the clothes and the skin and everything else by using a tone, a solid tone all the way through it. Okay, and I think it's a great way for you to actually see the shape of the hair you've created. Then finally squint and find the blackest parts of that hair. I like to separate my hairstyles into two colors, the lightest and the darkest. And I think that will help all of you simplify the millions and billions of details that you see when looking at a photo. So I'm going to do a little bit of dark. Well, this area for me actually is all quite dark. And what I think is a good rule of thumb is you're making it dark at the same time the pencil strokes you're using can indicate the directions that the hair is taking. But don't confuse that with drawing every hair, which is sort of a recipe for spaghetti head. Very distracting, not too sophisticated looking. And again, anything, you can correct anything as you go. You can also throw out a picture and start fresh. Sometimes you just really feel like you're pushing something that you don't feel good about anymore. You should let, joy be what leads you. All right, so I keep, adjusting a few things till I'm really happy with it. Now remember I said we were drawing
heads, not just faces. You know, so much is about the environment that things are in. So it's really important to get the neck placement and the shape of the shoulders. If those things are off, it will actually make the whole face look wrong. Okay. This face is done. This is rough. It does feel kind of rough. But you know, I'm really happy with it. So now I'm just going to play around and give you some other details. And again, remember, we can all make the habit of retracing and retracing and retracing the same lines. Very common. Let's try not to do that, because a few super clean lines here and there will really define the whole drawing. If every line becomes retrace, 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 you'll end up with a much messier feeling. Now, to finish this out, I'm going to do some things that are unrelated to drawing a face. Okay, I'm going to go into a little bit of garment detail, a little bit of shading. Well, shading makes sense. It's not unrelated. One thing I love to do when I'm drawing clothes and I'm just sketching in pencil is to tone the skin and nothing else. So I might tone her whole face, but not her hair, not her clothes. I love to do this. Now this is with a soft pencil on textured paper. Right now I'm just making a uniform tone for her skin. Let's see, wait, I see this line was, I don't know what this line was, but the jacket itself cuts out this way, and the bustier is like down here. Okay, so this is all skin. Okay, then I can get darker in areas where it's actually darker. Okay, bottom of chin, this cheekbone here. And I mean, we've all done our own makeup. You know, we're a little bit experienced with this stuff. Yes, your finger is going to get dirty and smushy. You'll have to clean it up later. I tend to shade the ears because they're not in front, they're in back. So when you shade something, it recedes, it falls back in space. Clavicle, take on a little more shadow here. Now, I almost always have this shape of shadow under the chin, which I always interpret as a triangle. For one reason, because triangles are such dynamic, energy-giving shapes to have in illustrations, but also because it really is a triangle, and simplifying shadows into basic shapes can make our life a lot easier. The dirtier my finger goes, I can come back and add more shadow where I wanted it. Like I noticed the outer edges of her eyes had more shadow. And I don't want to flatten out everything. I definitely want to have some areas that aren't shaded. But I want to try toning her entire hairdo. Okay, and then, not for correction, but only for shading and highlighting, not shading, highlighting, I'm going to take my eraser and highlight just a few shadows that need to be brought back. Brow bone, tip of nose. Oh, it's really fun that there's this highlight on the lower lip. Something right under the chin shadow. There's a highlight. It's a highlight here. That's interesting. I've never done that. I'm going to see how that goes. And maybe something's in here. If you do it everywhere, it loses its effect. But if you do in a few places, the highlights will have a lot of effect. There's my girl. And then finally, to take you ahead for like what's to come, I'm going to add a little top stitching into the jacket, which really brings a more designer feel. Strong shadow under the collar, makes it pop, shows that 3D form. Strong shadow between the jacket and her body. Yeah, there's a lot of shadow in here. I'm not making it up. It's in the photo.